Welcome back to another episode of the Max Turn Podcast. Kyle Stitch here today, flying solo for just a shorter episode. We're taking a break from our season preview series. Those will be back next week. We'll finish up the Metropolitan Division and then have one final episode with our overall season predictions, division order finishes, playoff teams, non-playoff teams, award winners, and even give some Stanley Cup playoff predictions as well. So subscribe to Max Turn Podcast, available on all major podcast platforms to know when those are available. Today, I'm going to take you through kind of some of the contracts that are not signed. So a couple of the restricted free agents that need a new contract for the upcoming season. But I'm going to spend the majority of this on talking about extension eligible players. There's been a lot of talk and noise around some of these bigger names, Connor McDavid being the biggest out there, Kaprizov as well. But I want to take you through kind of how panicked should you be if you are a fan of one of these teams and the star player is not signed. And I think the takeaway that we're going to get to, and I'll break it all down, is most fans should be okay, shouldn't feel overly panicked right now. Again, most teams fans, and we'll get into that. But I think first, important to start with the three restricted free agents that remain unsigned. So Luke Evanglista with the Nashville Predators, Mason McTavish with the Anaheim Ducks, and Luke Hughes with the New Jersey Devils. So these are interesting ones because of, first off, let's start with the lowest projected contract value, and that's Luke Evanglista. We have him projected 2 years, $2.5 million. So all these projections can be found by finding our Blue Sky Threads profiles at AFP Analytics, and pin tweet still. All contract projections are still in the same sheet, including the ones for this past offseason as well as extension eligible players. So Luke Evanglista, we had projected, as I said, 2 years, $2.5 million. And I don't know what the holdup is here. I don't know if someone's trying to get term, but all reports seem to indicate they're in agreement on a short-term contract. This one to me is a pretty cut and dry. The 2.5 makes sense. Yes, we have a wide range of kind of comparable players for Evanglista, but it doesn't seem like a high enough dollar value for it to be of a major concern for Nashville, especially after the contract they gave out to Nick Hague this offseason. I don't understand why they would be willing to do that, but then not willing to seemingly bridge whatever financial gap there is with, I'm not going to say a budding young star, but a young player with some potential for their organization. It just doesn't make sense, doesn't add up to me as to why this contract is not done. It's just a weird one to be playing hardball on. It's not, again, if they're in agreement that it's going to be a short-term deal, it doesn't seem like the dollar value should be that hard to come to an agreement to, but not privy to the conversations and negotiations going on. But yeah, this one, I'm not necessarily concerned, but I would be just questioning what's going on. And the longer that Luke Evanglista misses time, the more concerned I do get, because that's just gonna hurt his ability to probably come into the lineup in shape and perform at game speed. And that's just not good for Nashville either, because he should be a pretty solid I'll say top 9 player with even top 6 potential depending on how the season goes. And for a team that kind of struggled offensively last year, I would think trying to find any offense where you can would probably be a smart idea. But again, what do I know? I'm just sitting here recording this episode, not in the Nashville Predators front office. The other two RFAs that have remained unsigned, Luke Hughes and Mason McTavish. Those, if you're a fan of the Ducks or Devils, there's a little bit more cause for concern there, in my opinion. McTavish seems to be the most interesting. There's seemingly been conflicting reports out there as to who's looking for what length. It would make a lot of sense if McTavish is not willing to lock himself into a long term contract, given the very rising cap and his rising performance over the past couple of years. So if you're him, you're very happy to bet on yourself to continue your level of play or get better. The team should be wanting to lock him into a long-term contract, and that trying to figure out a middle ground there could absolutely be causing issues and be a cause for concern. He'll play games for the Ducks this year, but I absolutely can see this one dragging out a little bit because the length and then coming up with what the fair value for that length is going to be tough. Some side's going to have to concede, and really the only leverage McTavish and his team, his agency, have is to not sign a contract that they're not comfortable with. Otherwise, it's just probably going to be a standoff there. He should end up playing games with the Ducks. If I'm the team again, I'm looking to get that long-term deal done, because what you're essentially doing in a short-term deal with the way the cap is expected to rise is you're betting that his performance over the next 2-3 years, depending on that length, 1, 2, 3 years, is going to has either plateaued or is going to decline. That's the only way that you're potentially going to be able to sign him on his next contract for any sort of similar value as what you would be able to do a long-term contract right now. So it'd be very smart if McTavish and his camp are holding out for a longer term contract. And I shouldn't say holding out, waiting. If you do not have a contract and you're not in camp, you are just simply unsigned. A player should not be on the ice with their team if they don't have a contract and don't have some like insurance or tryout agreement or something in place. So he's simply unsigned. He's not holding out. He does not have a contract. A holdout is someone who is under contract but not actually performing services. So McTavish, Luke Hughes, those two players are unsigned, not holding out. So transitioning to Luke Hughes, this one is tough because New Jersey, frankly, does not have the cap space to give him the long-term contract that they really should be giving him. According to cap wages, right now the Devils have about $6.3 million in cap space. Luke Hughes on a long-term contract should come in the 6, 7, 8 year range. We have projected 6 years, 8.4 million. As you add some length to that, we would expect the average annual value to go up. I know there's been smoke around an 8-year deal. I don't see how you get there with the cap situation the Devils currently have. It's the math does not math there. And if you're the Devils, just like I laid out with McTavish, you need to get this long-term deal done. Going short-term is going to cost you astronomically in the next couple of years. So this one I would be probably the most concerned about as a Devils fan of the remaining three, not because you're going to lose Luke Hughes, but because the most likely outcome is something that's suboptimal. So you're either going to end up probably trading a player away, waiving an extra player or something to find extra cap space to fit the long-term contract in, or you're going to have to voluntarily give him a shorter term deal, meaning going to have to renegotiate a contract sooner, and that sooner renegotiation could cost you very dearly. And that's simply just because you don't have the cap space to do this now. Kind of look at so Vancouver, where his oldest brother plays, they were able to sign his oldest brother, Quinn, to a long-term contract right out of the gate. But that, along with some bad contracts that they had given out, forced them to do a short-term contract with Elias Pettersson, and then ultimately gave him the long-term contract that most people are already questioning if that's good value. If Vancouver had had the cap space originally to sign Pettersson to a long-term contract, they have him on a much more palatable deal right now, and there's a lot less questions about whether he's worth it, whether they should have traded him, all that stuff. I'm not saying that Luke Hughes is destined for the same performance path, but contract value wise, yeah, you you need to get a long-term deal done, but you've kind of backed yourself into a corner where it's just not really possible with the numbers that you have on your books right now. So that one again, he'll be playing for the Devils this year. He has to play for the Devils this year. But man, I've been concerned about that, the way that New Jersey kind of operated this offseason, and the fact that it's still unsigned. I just not great cap management there. So those are the three restricted free agents. If I was kind of we'll score everyone in this episode out of 10 for level of concern. I'll put Evanglista at like a 5, McTavish at like a 6, and Hughes at, it's probably a little bit too high. Say Evanglista, we'll say 3, McTavish 5, Hughes 6, and Hughes very much being driven by the fact that there's probably going to be a suboptimal outcome there. Now let's get into the pending unrestricted free agents that are eligible to sign an extension right now. So these are players that are going into the last year of their contract. If they play out this season with no new contract in place, they would be, most of these will be unrestricted free agent eligible. I'm going to throw one extra into this discussion in a minute, but the ones that are unrestricted eligible will be able to leave their current team in the offseason, and their current team can do nothing about that. No compensation, no anything. So the two biggest names here are definitely Connor McDavid in Edmonton and Kirill Kaprizov in Minnesota. Also included in this conversation, and whose names have been in the media recently, Jack Eichel, Vegas, Kyle Connor, Winnipeg, Artemi Panarin, throw out there very quickly, but not as much of a, probably doesn't belong quite as much in this. Martin Necas, Colorado, Adrian Kempe, LA Kings, and Alex Tuch with the Buffalo Sabres. In the order I just listed those players is the order that we have them projected contract value wise. So we have obviously McDavid projected the most of that group, and then Alex Tuch projected the least of that group. So if I were going to kind of tier these players, McDavid's obviously a tier above everyone else. Kaprizov is probably close behind, and Eichel would be kind of with that as well. Then you kind of have Kyle Connor, who's probably, again, a little bit below those guys. And I'm going to throw in not an unrestricted free agent, but someone very close, and that's Jason Robertson, Dallas Stars. He is will be a restricted free agent, but he would only have 1 year left until becoming an unrestricted free agent. So the only difference in Robertson's situation really is this offseason. If he were to play out this year, he would only be able to negotiate with the Dallas Stars, basically. So Dallas would have the upper hand of being able to keep him, but otherwise his value should come in pretty close to some of these other unrestricted free agents that I'm talking about. So he's not irrelevant to this discussion either. And then Necas and Kempe are probably in that just behind Connor, and I'd put Roberts in there as well. And then Alex Tuch is probably the lowest of all those, but still definitely in the upper tier of potential unrestricted free agents. So this is a very interesting situation because you know who's going to be the top paid player, and that's Connor McDavid. At least he should be. And then after him, you can kind of start to slot in other players. So again, Kaprizov and Eichel should come in behind McDavid, but by how much, I don't know. We projected McDavid for reference, 4 years, 16.35 million. Kaprizov, 8 years, 14.2, and Eichel, 8 years, 14. So if those two were interchanged or Eichel stays in Vegas and takes a little less, would not be shocking. But one of probably McDavid or Kaprizov need to sign first in order to allow some of these other players to kind of figure out where they should slot in. The issue is it doesn't seem like either McDavid or Kaprizov are in a rush to sign a new contract. And so I'm just going to come out and say that's a level of concern out of 10, 9. We're at 9 for probably both of those. There's not much of a reason as far as like value of contract negotiations for why they are not signed. McDavid should be able to go in and name his price, and Edmonton should say, okay. Kaprizov seemingly has had contracts well within his value, maybe even above what his projected value is. Probably the reason that both McDavid and Kaprizov have not signed contracts is because they are thinking that they are going to leave their organization come the end of this season. To put it bluntly, if you're an Oiler fan or if you're a Wild fan, I'd be very concerned. Not won't quite put it 10 out of 10 yet because there is still some time to get things worked out, but I started with 9, I'll say 8, 9 range out of 10 as far as level of concern goes. Again, no reason outside of them questioning their desire to commit to the organization for why they should be unsigned at this point. The fact that those two players have not signed makes everything else harder for teams and agents of other players that should fall in line behind. You don't want to be the team or agent to take the first contract and set the market kind of askew. So let's take like Martin Necas, or let's take Adrian Kempe. I think he's a very good example here. He's kind of in the middle of these very, very good to elite star players that is eligible for a contract. If the Kings give him something, so we have him projected 7 years, 9.175. 7 years, 9.175. So that's what we would expect him to get in the open market. Sometimes if the team wants to make sure that the player does not string this out, solicit like other type of deals, they might up that offer a little bit to kind of sweeten the pot to make sure the deal gets signed. So let's say 7 by 10 is fairly reasonable for Kempe. If his agent were to, and he and his agent were to accept something like 8 by 8.5, that becomes a major problem for other players such as Alex Tuch, Martin Necas in particular, the player that probably should. So Tuch should probably slide slightly behind Kempe, and Necas maybe a little bit above. We have Tuch projected for reference 7 years, 8.5 million, and Necas projected 7 years, 9.9 million. So if Kempe basically signed for what we have projected Alex Tuch at, that screws over Alex Tuch and his agents. It's going to be a much tougher case for him to go and say, well, I should get more than Adrian Kempe. Conversely, if the Kings come out and say, okay, we want this deal done, let's give you $12 million. Well, now you have Kyle Connor, who we projected at 8 years by $12 million, who's like, okay, well, now I'm going to get 14, and now the Winnipeg Jets are screwed. And then you have Jack Eichel, who decides, okay, well, I need to slot enough above Kyle Connor. We have him about 2 million above. So now he gets 16. And then Kaprizov, another million or so, is looking for 17. And you've just, as the LA Kings, created kind of a snowball effect. And the other teams and GMs are not going to be happy with you that you've just kind of set them down the wrong path. So most of these players that are unsigned are probably going to remain that way until someone kind of bites first. And realistically, the one that needs to bite first are the ones at the very top, so then players can start to slot in below them. I guess someone like an Alex Tuch could bite first and kind of set the market, but again, him and his agents don't want to look kind of foolish and buy like taking less and then some of the other ones coming in much higher. So it's a really, really tough kind of situation until the top guys start to commit. So McDavid, again, we have projected 4 years, 16.4, we'll call it. I'm very concerned, 8 to 9 out of 10 as far as level of concern. The only thing keeping it 10 out of 10 is there's still a season to go. He would of course set the market and be his own kind of place. Kaprizov projected 8 years, 14.2 million. Probably 8 out of 10. The only reason maybe he's a little less concerning than McDavid is he could be trying to wait McDavid out to slot in right behind him. But I'd be very concerned as a Wild fan. Jack Eichel, I'd say probably all the way down to like 5 out of 10. He really should be waiting out Connor McDavid to see where he comes in and then slotting just a little bit behind him. I guess the reason that my concern would be a little bit higher is maybe there's a chance that he wants to go back home and play for Boston or something like that. So if you're a Knights fan, maybe a little bit more concern. I also had a wild idea for Golden Knights fans, so maybe the team actually doesn't want to commit to Jack Eichel yet because they want to see what happens with the Connor McDavid situation to potentially pay McDavid this offseason and then let Eichel walk in free agency. That'd be wild. That'd be fun. It also would be very much in line with how Vegas operates. So but I would say in general, that's probably a little far-fetched. I wouldn't be super concerned about Jack Eichel yet. I'll say 5 out of 10. Say the same for Kyle Connor right now. Again, he's kind of, he could maybe be the one to set the we'll call it 1B market. So he maybe would make a little more sense to get done. But again, at the same time, you're waiting for some of the guys above you to kind of figure out where they're going to be, to figure out how much less you should be than them. So I'll put it at a 5 out of 10. Jason Robertson, I'll say 4 out of 10. Kind of same thing. You're really looking to see where someone like a Kyle Connor comes in before you're going to be able to really know where your value lies. Artemi Panarin, we had projected 4 years, 10.3. I don't really know exactly what to make of that situation. I'll say panic level. I'll say probably 4 or 5. I think some Rangers fans would be okay if they can't get him locked up on a big money contract. I think it's to the point where he's still a good player, but he's starting to get older, and it might be it's just not something that you want to, that it seems like fans want to have the team lock into a situation that's just not going to be favorable. So we'll say 4 or 5 because he would be a big loss for the Rangers, but I also can understand the logic of let's not do something rash right now and end up in a tough situation. Necas, he seemed destined for wanting to test the free agent markets going back like 2 years at this point. Well, I guess a year and a half. So I'll say 6 to 7 just because, and the panic scale just because he seems to want to test unrestricted free agency, and that's fully in his right. Given our projection for him, 7 years, 10 million, he should probably come in below Kyle Connor and but above potentially Kempe and Tuch here, which brings us to Adrian Kempe. 7 years, as I said, 9.2 million, 9.175. I'd put the panic like a 3 to 4 here. Again, just need other players to kind of set the market and figure out where things are. And then Alex Tuch right now with Buffalo, 7 years, 8.5 is our projection. I'd put the panic probably at 3 right now, maybe 4, because this is a situation where Buffalo can't necessarily afford to lose this player for nothing, and it would from a optic standpoint not look great. But it in the same sense, the way that everything else has played out this offseason, it would not be in either the team or the agency's best interest to be the first one to kind of sign the extension. So I really wouldn't be overly concerned right now. Publicly saying all the right things, but it's you contrast some of Alex Tuch's public statements to those of Connor McDavid's, and I would feel a lot better about Tuch truly wanting to re-up in Buffalo, and just it's just the business side of it just not there yet. And it again, it makes complete sense that he remains unsigned at this point. So I wouldn't panic. I would not be overly concerned right now for if I'm a Sabres fan. Of course, as this strings out and it starts getting closer to the trade deadline, and this applies to all these players, not just Alex Tuch, that's when you have to start to think, like, have some hardcore discussions about what is the best path for the team. The player should be upfront and honest and say, yeah, I think I'm going to test the market, and then the team can make a decision if they want to try and keep them or let them walk. But for the Tucks, the Kempes of the world in particular, I think patience. I think patience is key. If sitting here in January recording a similar episode and these players are still unsigned, we're bumping that panic meter up dramatically. But those players are unsigned and some of the other players have signed. Yeah, that's where we start to get into like 9 out of 10 for panic. But until you see probably a Kempe, Necas, or maybe Connor get a deal done, I would not panic on Tuch or one of the other players who have not yet signed. Of course, Connor McDavid signing his extension would then allow everything to probably fall in place. And if they don't, then again, 10 out of 10 on panic meters. And then quickly on some of the RFA restricted free agents besides Jason Robertson that are eligible for extension. So Lane Hudson, he's kind of in his own category because there's not necessarily another defenseman that would approach where his value should be. But the big group to kind of talk about is Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, Logan Cooley, Leo Carlson. James and I have talked about on past episodes that this group is very difficult to kind of differentiate in that they're whoever gets the higher contract value is probably the one who signs after, in that maybe they don't pass Bedard. So maybe it's Fantilli, Cooley, Leo Carlson are kind of waiting out each other, and the last one to sign ends up with the biggest deal. But it could be the first to sign because then an argument maybe is made that, oh, you're not, this other one is not quite as good as the one who's already signed. It's not surprising that none of them are done, and I think Bedard getting done probably has to happen before Fantilli will slot in, before Cooley will slot in, before Carlson will slot in. We have Bedard highest at 7 years, just over 10 million. Fantilli 7 years, 9.5. Logan Cooley 7 years, a little less than 9.5, and Leo Carlson 7 years, 9.4. Again, those very likely could kind of shift around, but there's no motivation for one of those to set the market, especially before Connor Bedard signs. So if you're putting a panic on any of these, Bedard's the one that you probably should be panicking a little bit on, but it's none of these players are necessarily you're too concerned about at this point. So it's really, if you're a fan of a team that has one of these bigger unrestricted free agents, that you should start to be concerned. But even then, the point of this episode was kind of to pump the brakes a little bit on that. Maybe fuel the McDavid fire a little bit, Kaprizov fire a little bit. But again, once you get past those two players, I would not be concerned quite yet. I know that Sabres fans in particular have a little post-traumatic stress from past episodes of star players not necessarily wanting to commit to the organization, but I think right now, pump the brakes. It's okay. Same with LA. I know maybe there's a little bit of anxiety there with Adrian Kempe. Again, it's too early. Winnipeg just lost Nick Ehlers last offseason. I'm a little more concerned on Kyle Connor, but not overly, just because again, there's just no market truly set for him. I get like the only comparable players out there are from last year, Mitch Marner and Mikko Rantanen. So if someone wants to bite and take that deal, fine. But those players signed under a $95.5 million cap, And the next season, when the players I just referenced, Connor, Kempe, Tuch, Necas, Eichel, McDavid, Kaprizov, when all their contracts start, the salary cap will be 104 million. So we use percentage of cap to kind of figure out where the value should lie. So outside of maybe taking the percentage of cap that Marner and Rottenen got and using that to kind of set where the next contract should show up, it's going to be tough. And the tricky part for Marner and Rottenen is they both sign contracts in states with teams that play in states with no income tax. So in theory, the net value of those is going to be more than just a $14 million contract. If Alex Tuch, that's probably a bad example, if Kyle Connor signed that in Winnipeg, for example. So he would be looking for more gross value to kind of match a similar net. So again, early, I wouldn't be super concerned unless you're a fan of the Oilers or Wild. Appreciate you listening. Max Certain Podcast available on all major podcast platforms. Our content, including our contract projections, are available on X at AFP Analytics. Blue Sky Thread, same handle. You can also find through our link tree a link to buy me a coffee if you've enjoyed our work through the off season, wish to support it. We appreciate any contributions through our Buy Me a Coffee. And the end of, well, I guess in the next week or so, we're going to withdraw all those contributions, take 10%, and donate to Rochester Emergency Veterinary Service. And then we'll keep you updated what our next kind of campaign, whatever, will be. But we do appreciate any of those contributions, just like we appreciate you listening, subscribing to Max Stern Podcast. And we'll be back next time to talk about the Metropolitan Division season preview. And we'll talk to you next time.